it's very interesting because most times in Nigeria we practice democracy. We say our democracy is still very young. Of course, we will keep drawing instances because we look up to the United States model of democracy as, you know, as what we should follow. But interestingly, how the vote or how election itself takes place seems to be significantly different from how it is done here in Nigeria. There is the electoral college, as it were, and I think it's something that a host of Nigerians still haven't been able to get their heads around. Do you mind explaining it?
Sure. Many Americans can't get their heads around it either, so it's no one should feel bad. It's a holdover from when our Constitution was created in 1787. The system has never been changed. At the time, of course, 18th century, the founding fathers wanted to have a system whereby the states actually selected the president, because our system is based on a federalist system. It gives a lot of power to the states, not just to the federal government. And so the power to select the president was devolved to the states, and that's how our current system evolved. And in a nutshell, basically the people in any given state cast their vote on behalf of a certain candidate, and when that is all finished, individuals who are called electors actually will officially, in December, not today, not tomorrow, not this week, but in December, will gather, and they have sworn to, if a certain candidate wins the majority of the votes, they will cast the official vote saying, I choose to elect Barack Obama as president. The reason I think it's important not to dwell on it too much is because it's essentially a formality in the process. Today, everyone's celebrating because Obama has gotten more than 270 electoral votes, which is the number that you need to get to win. And the process that occurs in December is something that it'll happen. The news media will report it for 30 seconds, and then that's it, because it's basically a formality of people acknowledging to say, aha, I said I would elect, as an elector in this official process, I would select Barack Obama to be president, Joe Biden to be vice president. Boom, that's it, and the process moves on from there.
So, but how did they get the figure for the electoral votes today?
The system is that in all but 2 states, whoever wins the most votes in a given state wins all the electoral votes from that state. It's a winner-take-all system, as we call it. And so when they announced the winner in, let's say, Ohio has 18 electoral votes. The number of electoral votes per state is based on the population, the representation they have in Congress. Ohio has 2 senators and 16 members of the House, so they have 18 electoral votes. It's actually fairly simple math. And then whoever wins the most votes in that state wins all the electoral votes, all 18. It's not a proportional system. And that's why the electoral map in the United States can be so confusing, because only those states where they're very closely contested, what are sometimes called the battleground states or the toss-up states or the swing states, those are the states like Ohio, like Florida, like Nevada, Iowa, Wisconsin, where it could go one way or the other pretty easily. Yeah. In the vast majority of the states, at this point in our political history, there isn't really any doubt who's going to win. In California, it's a very strongly Democratic state. President Obama was going to win that, 100% chance. In Texas, our second most populous state, Governor Romney was going to win there. It's a very Republican state. So the election was effectively contested in just a very small number of states, somewhere between 6 and 9. And the candidates spent effectively all of their time, I mean literally all of their campaign time, in just this small number of states, because it's a winner-take-all. If you can get just one more vote than the other person, you win all of the electoral votes, and that gives you a big step towards winning the presidency.
Is it something you would advocate for a developing democracy?
It's worked well for us. I don't think if you were designing a system from scratch in this day and age that it's probably one that you would select. Many Americans struggle with it. Why do we still have this? The basic reason I think why we still have the Electoral College is because it's in our Constitution, and you would have to amend the Constitution, which is very hard to do. You would have to have 2/3 of the vote in a 2/3 majority in both the Senate and the House of Representatives, and even once you get to that point, it then has to get ratified by 3/4 of all the state legislatures. So 38 of our 50 states individually would have to support the exact same thing, the same language. There would be no room for debate or discussion. It's either yes or no, you support this. That's a very complicated process. It's only since our Constitution and Bill of Rights was passed, it's only happened 17 times and only once in my lifetime. and not on a controversial issue in my lifetime. So it would be a very difficult thing, and I think many Americans will say, this system doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but it's worked for us for 224 years. This is the 57th presidential election. Yes, there have been a few instances where a candidate won the electoral college majority without winning the popular vote, most recently in 2000, George W. Bush. But Americans, for the most part, have been tolerant of that and have said, you know what, the system has worked for us for a long time, and it really would take a groundswell of support for a change for that to really happen. And it doesn't seem like there's that groundswell at this point from my own perspective.
What about the part where, yesterday we saw Mitt Romney campaigning, and then you have people ask, wait a minute, did they actually campaign on election day?
Mm-hmm.
Did you? Okay.
Governor Romney did, and I believe Vice President Biden also made
And
one
that's within the
campaign
laws
stop.
there.
It is allowed. It is actually not normal. Usually the last day of campaigning is the day before the election, but that's not because of a law of any sort. I know in many countries you're not allowed to campaign in the last 1 or 2 or 3 days. In the United States, we have no such ban on that. If anybody ever tried to pass a law like that, they probably would face a very serious lawsuit, because our First Amendment guarantees freedom of speech, and I think people would argue that would limit your speech. Hey, I'm going to do whatever I want to do leading up to and even on Election Day. Governor Romney, it was a very unusual move, but he clearly felt the political incentive, the political need to try and go win some more votes in Ohio and Pennsylvania, and so he traveled there on Tuesday.
If there is anything, you're an American, you've watched your elections, you're very interested in what goes on there, but if there's anything you're going to ask a developing democracy not to take away from your process, what would it be?
That's a good question. We spend a lot of money on the political process. I think the calculation I've seen most recently for this election, if you combine all of the money that was spent on the campaign, is about $6 billion US. Now, it's not government money. We do not have campaigns that are financed by the government. We have campaigns that are financed privately. Many people, millions of people, give very small contributions, $10, $25, $50. The Obama campaign was particularly fond of saying, we have 500,000 new donors, and their average contribution was $37, something along those lines. There are people who give a lot more than that, and they perhaps have an outsized influence in the political process. And I think a lot of people would, not all, but a lot of people argue that that's probably not a great thing. But most other countries seem to have some sort of public financing of their elections in some fashion. And I think that's probably relatively healthy. So the outsized influence of money, of private money, is probably something that a lot of Americans would say, we sort of don't like it that way. On the other hand, again, it would require significant change. It would require a constitutional amendment to really change how our system works. And I think most Americans are of the opinion of, there are a lot of things I don't like about the system, but at the end of the day, changing it might make it worse.
So it's not so much as about the expense, but the fact that the money is private.
The expense is one thing also, because if you are in one of the battleground states in the last weeks of the election, all you are seeing is television ads. And I've never heard an expert opinion suggest that is the absolute best recipe for determining the outcome of an election. But it becomes a who has the most money competition, and if your opponent has ads, television ads on all the time, then you feel incumbent upon having ads that compete and contrast. And I just don't know, it's hard to come to the conclusion that that's healthy, to have certainly dialogue and transparency, very important, an essential part of our democracy, and I think any democracy. But it is a difficult thing when there is so much money spent in that, and at the end of it, it doesn't seem like it's all that well spent. So that's something that bothers a lot of Americans.
The reason I was smiling, I was saying that definitely for the television companies, it definitely will be healthy.
They think it's a great idea. No, absolutely. That is definitely true.
Okay, but just this one before we go, I know you're Chief Political Officer, but you will get people ask you, economy and health were key issues in this election.
Sure.
What about in Africa? Does Africa expect some sort of robust trade partnership with the United States?
Well, I think in many countries in Africa, and Nigeria is perhaps the best example, already have a very robust relationship with the United States. Obviously, we're a very important trade partner, not just in oil. I mean, I think that's the issue that gets the most attention. It is the one that involves the greatest amount of money. But Nigeria is the largest importer of wheat from the United States, of U.S. wheat. There is no other country that imports more wheat from the U.S. So it's not just, you're not just an export partner for us, you're also an import partner. We have a very long-standing, very positive relationship. Nigeria is an important partner in this region, our most important partner in sub-Saharan Africa. That has been the case for some time, and it will certainly continue to be the case under the second term of President Obama.